What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to For the Record. I am your host, Ainsley Bowden, joined as always by the esteemed tech guru over at Season Gaming, Mr. Karl Dwyer. What's happening, my friend?
All good, all good. It's the end of my workday. You're still in the thick of yours. It's all good.
Yeah, this is a lunch break recording today, but it all works. It all works. So before we jump into the continuation of our RDNA2 discussion this week, quick little housekeeping. First, I wanted to thank the community for the response we've gotten to these episodes so far. As you know, this is going to be only episode 3. Karl and I are just kind of getting going on this and getting our feet wet sort of thing, but we've had a really good response to our initial 2 episodes and some great comments. And just a continuation on that, if you do enjoy these conversations, you want to chat with me, Karl, anyone else at Season Gaming or in our community, please check out the Discord. We have a tech talk over there where Karl and Karl and a few others like to really dive into tech on a daily basis and just talk about all the things going on in the industry. So if you enjoy that, you can find that at the top of our main site. Shout out to Tavish Hill, who left us a really long, detailed comment last week and has since joined our Discord. And you guys have been chatting every day. It's awesome.
Absolutely. Brilliant conversation. Love it.
Yeah. So that's what it's all about. So if you enjoy this type of thing, even if you're just here to kind of learn, as I said, I'm not as well versed as some others like Karl or Tavish in these pieces, but hey, it's all education. So that's what we're all about here. So today we are going to be continuing the RDNA2 conversation with a couple other aspects. Before we jump into the first, because we got a few questions about mesh shaders in that conversation, so we're going to jump into that. But Karl, did you hear that VRR may finally be coming to PlayStation 5? The hell's going on over there?
Yeah. I'll be dead before that arrives.
So we were talking prior to recording that in their press release, Sony said a specific phrasing that I found curious, which was the VRR is coming to any game on PlayStation 5. And so we're going to maybe dissect that maybe in the future. We'll see what they obviously release when it comes, but that's a curious statement to say any game when in reality it's on the developer's onus to basically develop it into their game today.
Yeah, it makes you think, is it a system level or a game package level? And given Sony's track record with this, let's wait for further clarity.
Yeah, we'll wait.
I don't know, and I wouldn't like to speculate, to be honest with that.
Yeah. I just thought it was fun to mention. All right, so getting back to continuing the RDNA2 conversation, let's start with, because we got the most questions about mesh shaders, technology that, again, I'm not the expert here, but as I understand it, kind of changes some of the rendering pipeline. It's been around for a few years, as you were explaining to me prior to recording. But while it obviously has some very positive improvements, there are, as you were explaining to me, which we'll go into now, there's a lot of other things that can take place. And I don't want to say recreate, might not be the right word, but replicate maybe some of the functionality or processing that mesh shaders can assist with. Is that fair? Or you might want to explain a little better.
Yeah, so mesh shaders has been around for about 4 years, or probably even before that, to be fair. It's not completely new. And what mesh shaders is, and any type of these shader sort of derivatives in these names that you hear, they're all efficiency plays.
Yeah.
So they're all aimed at driving efficiencies within that graphics pipeline, within the pipeline of how you get from looking at data straight the way through to putting something on a screen. And utilizing the hardware in between and the APIs and all the other stuff, all the magic that happens in between there. So mesh shaders themselves are a way of getting a lot more granular with things that happen before your rasterization or in and around rasterization, than them areas of the pipeline. And if you think you have to dial it a little bit further back than that. So you'll hear things like primitives, and you'll hear things like vertices and things like this that are mentioned in this. And you've got primitive shaders, and you're drawing vertices and all this good stuff. So mesh shaders, the word mesh is that you mesh things together. You mesh processes together. So you start to look at the likes of primitives, which are the likes of drawing elements like lines and curves and polygons on a screen. And vertices are sort of the spaces where they are, so the points on the surfaces where you want to calculate where something goes or something is. And what mesh shaders do is combine these two together in a process to make it more efficient. Instead of having to look at them independently, collapses them together and allows you to be a bit more granular with how you approach drawing primitives, drawing vertices, in and before the rasterization process, that place where you start to do your calc. So that's what mesh shaders are in fundamentally are. They're a combination of two parts of your graphics pipeline that have been meshed together, mesh shader, to drive an efficiency of getting geometry onto the screen. That's what a mesh shader is. So, but if you think about the way graphics cards at the moment, and especially in PC land, the master race, you do get you've got a whole bunch of GPUs out there, right, with all this type of functionality, and in the PC space you have to drive commonality, because you can imagine if you think about it in a console space, you've got SKUs. Now, how many different types of graphics cards are there?
Yeah, endless.
Yeah, so you have to find commonality, and mesh shaders and VRS, these features that sit on top of these graphics cards are a play at driving some commonality to make it easier on developers to utilize features which are going to make games better looking, more efficient in how they're rendered, and all that good stuff. In the console space, it's a little bit different because you're talking about a closed environment. It is a specific SKU. It's a specific piece of machinery. The Xbox is the outlier here, because the Xbox is very much aligned to PC architecture, and it needs to be like that. It does have obviously some bespoke bits in there to utilize being a console to make a benefit of a closed platform.
Yep.
But it needs to be really, really close to the PC, because Microsoft, God love them, they treat the PC as an SKU. They treat it as part of the ecosystem. Sony went, oh, there's money there. Oh, let's go and buy Nixus.
Yeah,
and tack it on. They don't really think of PC in that respect, but wrongly so, by the way. They don't think of PC in that way. So when you've got the likes of Xbox, looking at their GPU, you're going to want to bore out some commonalities, and you're going to want the best features that sit on that from a PC perspective to drive all the efficiencies. When you build a game once, you build it right, and you build it for everything that you're going to release it on. And Microsoft have just got the sweet spot there with what they're doing so far. But just to circle back around to mesh shaders, it's an efficiency play for when you're drawing things like your primitives, which are your lines, your curves on your screen, your polygons, and your vertices, sort of the actual positions and where you want to tack things on. And it's melding them two together, meshing them two together, and driving an efficiency in that graphics pipeline.
Gotcha. Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. See, simply explained, which is the goal. So you, among the technologies you mentioned there, you did mention VRS, so variable rate shading. So let's talk about how that plays into this architecture as well, and the graphics pipeline that you're referring to.
Yeah. So again, VRS has been around for a while as well, but like mesh shaders, like VRS, it takes a while for these type of things to get used and to get embedded, and for developers to actually build them into the way they create games, because they're creatures of habit, right? They find a way of doing something, and it's the least bit of friction, and they'll do it over and over and over again. And then somebody will go, what about mesh shaders? Well, man, I've got to now incorporate this. So it takes them for a while to get up to speed with this stuff. But when they do, that's when we'll see magic happen on the screens. And these new processes that are coming in, so for that, we'll talk about VRS now. So the likes of VRS is going to be, again, another efficiency play in only utilizing the GPU to spend time where it's needed to, when it's putting all its horsepower behind something to generate something on the screen. So you can, within the same sort of frame, you can vary the rate of what computation level you want to apply to something on screen. So you don't do one big load of GPU power just on one frame. You can vary the level within the same frame where you want, so you really direct where you want that GPU horsepower to be pointed at. And it's you can look at this from a good way of thinking about VRS is in the VR space, so virtual reality. If you think about the way your eyes work, where your eyes are focused is where you want the clearest image to be possible. So you'd spend a lot of time from the GPU making the resolution of that field of view of where you are in VR very high res, very crisp, looking great because you want the customer to go, wow, that looks amazing. The peripheral around that or other elements within the scene, you may want to just dial back the amount of power that you're applying to that. So you don't need to be as high resolution. You don't need to be just, to spend all that amount of horsepower on them parts. That's what variable rate shading is. There's a few other things that you can forwarded rendering is another one of them, where you can track that with eye movements, so you can, where your pupils are going is where the GPU power is pointed. Forwarded render is very much like that as well. It's a similar technology in some ways. So the VRS is going to be, when people get under the skin of this, is going to be a really good play on making that GPU operate above what its numbers mean.
Sure.
So yeah, that's essentially what VRS is. You can vary the power, the amount of shading computate that you apply to something on the screen within the same frame.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny how, ever since the beginning of these things, that's all we're talking about here are processes to try and create new efficiencies or find ways around bottlenecks is all we're talking about.
Absolutely, always. Yeah. And you can do that one of two ways. You can do that by applying a specific bit of hardware, or like what they've done here is with variable rate shading, mesh shading, applying commonality through GPUs across multiple vendors to create features that are going to be beneficial. Or you can get really specific with an API and a GPU and code to the metal to get the same effect.
Yeah. But then you're down to going back to singular SKU type approaches.
Exactly. And I think if you've absolutely seen right through me. So that's exactly where it is. So if it's a single SKU closed environment like a PS5, you can get really low level on the API. You're not really thinking about having to go to build this content for a PC or another commonality. You've got a PS4 Pro and you've got a PlayStation 5, and you're building for them SKUs, and you can get granular with how you manipulate your GPU to do certain things. But on the other side, you've got the horsepower of Microsoft behind this, with what will be a great environment in GDK when they get it up to scratch.
Right.
Which is, they'll build once, they'll build right, and they'll build it across multiple platforms at once. And that's the way to go.
Yeah, it makes sense. So the other aspect we want to touch on here, because they do seemingly take two different approaches in how they're utilizing what would be referred to as machine learning. So we were talking prior to recording here, in that Xbox has been a little more, don't know the phrasing you want to use here. I don't know if forward thinking is fair, but
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so forward thinking on the machine learning front. So we hear a lot about machine learning, or at least people in the space talk a lot about machine learning and what it's going to do, and where PlayStation 5 and Series X having however big of an advantage it is in that space. Why don't you talk a little bit about specifically how machine learning could impact Xbox Series X going forward?
So machine learning, there's a number of different ways you can use it. There's numerous ways you can leverage machine learning. One way would be to see if you can derive some type of learning around how a scene is created. So you can infer detail on a screen to upscale the resolution.
Yep.
So you train your machine learning elements, the AI, to think of an apple to look like an apple at a high resolution. So, for instance, if you use a low resolution texture on a game, machine learning can infer the detail. So it can say, right, I know that's an apple, that'll have this type of texture, and it can actually create in real time the texture that apple should look like. But the base texture underneath it doesn't have that detail. The math on top of it from machine learning will apply that detail.
Interesting.
There's a whole load of efficiencies, and Tavish has explained this in the chat as well. He sort of highlighted these elements. And DLS does this in a roundabout way as well. But what you've got is that the fact you could use low resolution textures.
Yeah.
Where you could have machine learning infer the detail, which means it realizes the detail that's not in the original texture and make it higher resolution. Now, the benefits there are that original texture was small because it's low res.
Of course.
So now you're thinking about efficiencies in packet sizes as well.
Yeah.
one way you can use, the likes of machine learning. And NVIDIA with DLSS, they do that in another way because they treat every game or games that have DLSS available, where they just go and just infer detail on that screen to increase the resolution. So you could say, I want to render this screen at 1440p, but I want to upscale it to 4K. And in some cases with DLSS, that 4K image that's been upscaled from 1440p actually looks better than a native 4K game. So these are the advantages of AI and machine learning.
Yeah.
Another way of thinking about machine learning is, you can exacerbate the effects of NPCs within a game. You can make them act more lifelike because you can train them to operate in a certain way and react to the environment around them. There are multiple uses of machine learning. And I think this is one area of the business that's going to grow exponentially over time.
Okay.
We've got limited capability on the Xbox Series X now compared to the likes of NVIDIA.
Sure.
But I think maybe the next iteration of these consoles, and maybe when we get into the cloud and so forth, we're really going to see the benefits of machine learning. And if you think about the fact that, if you're going to infer detail from a low resolution texture that is a small size, but you're going to make it look like, for instance, a 4K image.
Yep.
Imagine the benefits that has to streaming as well, because you're not having to stream native 4K resolution. So machine learning is the utopia that hopefully within the next 5 years we're going to get to. Yeah,
it's amazing, really, and it goes right back to the same conversation. You're creating efficiencies and eliminating bottlenecks because using that tiny texture is it's more efficient across the board in everything from GPU to streaming to data processing to storage space to everything. It's really interesting.
Absolutely. So if you think about the Xbox Series X, they used more or less standardized components for the likes of the I/O components within the Series X. Doesn't matter a bean if you're going to invest in machine learning over the top of that. So you're not having to move massive chunks of data around anymore.
Right.
You move smaller chunks of data around, and you infer detail when you get to the last stage of your rendering pipeline.
Yeah. Very cool.
Many ways to skin a cat. You don't have to do the brute force, stupid approach PS5 does with the I/O.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I think that's what makes the comparison between the consoles so interesting that we've talked about. So, and the different approaches that these, whether it be NVIDIA or AMD, et cetera, are taking to solve these challenges that developers face in making their products. So, it's cool. Very cool. Well, I think that'll wrap us up for the RDNA2 discussion. We talked about big topic right now with AMD is and I'm gonna this is a mouthful, the Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2.0, which I joked sounded like a new Capcom game. But I think that's a big topic right now. We got the press announcement, I believe, 2 days ago as we're recording this, that is now available on Xbox. It's not being used yet, right? It has to be developed for, but it's now available in the GDK. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it will be. It depends. I mean, this type of thing will be available across AMD vendors, essentially.
Sure.
But getting into GDK is probably a priority for Microsoft at the moment.
Of course. So I think we'll come back in a couple of weeks and we'll talk about that next and the benefits and how it compares to DLSS, right? And pluses, minuses, all that great stuff. Sound good?
Absolutely. And just to pimp up again, get in the Discord. If there's questions, we can all learn together. If there's questions that you've got there that you want us to answer or themes that you want us to pick up on, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, please do. Leave us comments. We're doing our best to, hopefully you feel as we're doing our best to explain some of this tech as simply as possible. Like I said, not all of us are extremely well versed in these things. That's myself included. So we're doing our best, but comments help. Join us in the Discord. We can chat on a daily basis. It's the whole point here is for everyone to learn and just have a fun conversation about the technology that drives these games. So if you're enjoying this, please let us know. We'd appreciate it. So, Karl, that about wrap us up?
That's a wrap.
All right, man. Thanks as always. Tuning in to Season Gaming. For the record, I'm your host, Ainsley Bowden. That is Karl Dwyer, and we will see you next time. Peace.